Hello and welcome. I'm Anand Naidu, sitting in for Riz Khan. For a country that's only 14 years old, the African nation of Eritrea might be facing one of its toughest challenges yet. The US State Department is threatening to designate the country of 4 million people as state sponsor of terrorism. Washington accuses Asmara of supporting the Islamic courts and other Islamic rebel groups in Somalia. The measure could lead to sanctions against the already impoverished nation. Meanwhile, a 10-year border dispute with its neighbor and arch-enemy Ethiopia is heating up, and some experts warn of a new all-out war. To discuss these challenges and others faced by Eritrea, we are joined by His Excellency President Isaias Afwerki. Mr. President, thanks for your time.
Thank you.
These are indeed critical days for Eritrea. As I've just mentioned, there's a possibility that the United States could label your country a state sponsor of terrorism. That could have widespread implications for Eritrea. How do you plan on responding to this threat?
The question is not a matter of responding to the threat. The threat is based on false assumptions. It's a result of a frustrated strategy in Somalia on the part of officials at the State Department, and it's like looking for a scapegoat to justify the mistakes made in that particular country in the Horn of Africa. And these false accusations have not been proven, and a false alarm and a threat based on failures and mistakes and meant to justify those mistakes has no bearing at all as far as Eritrea is concerned.
Well, you say the threat is based on false assumptions on the part of the United States. Are you going to go about and show the United States that these are false assumptions, and how are you going to do that?
Well, I think they will have to prove what they've assumed by facts on the ground. You cannot be an investigator, a prosecutor, a judge, and a police at the same time. They will have to come up with evidences, prove to the public opinion and prove to international organizations that their assumptions are based on facts and information, reliable to be taken seriously by anybody.
Okay, let's look at one of those allegations. One of the allegations is that Eritrea is providing military and other assistance to the Islamic courts group. Are you providing assistance to this group?
Where is the Islamic courts in the first place? The Islamic court has been ousted, and we were told that it was finished. It does not exist in Somalia. How can one say that we've been providing an ousted Islamic court or so-called Islamic court with weapons? Where are those evidences? And we need proof for those accusations. Unless they are proven by fact, assumptions cannot be taken for granted.
Well, relations between the United States and Eritrea are very poor at the moment. And a few days ago, you called for Washington to, and I'm going to be quoting here, change its frame of thinking and end acts of adventurism. What exactly do you want Washington to do?
Well, it's not only Eritrea, it's not only the Horn of Africa. This has become trendy. It's false assumptions, it's weapons of mass destruction, it's accusations of supporting or sponsoring terror. This trend will have to change. If the United States has any strategic interest in any area, those interests could be guaranteed by the approach that would take mutual benefits and shared values. It can't be assumed that the United States, with the stereotypical trend we see, where we have seen the last few years, could develop good relations not only in our area but also in so many places around the world.
And what is Eritrea prepared to do to improve those relations?
We have done nothing to disimprove this relationship. The United States has preferred to take us as a scapegoat, and we're saying this attitude will have to change. The trendy attitude will have to change, and then definitely the United States can expect any party to work towards developing and working relationships with its authorities.
You know, the United States is planning a greater presence not just in the Horn of Africa, but in the whole of Africa. There are plans to establish what is known as AFRICOM, the African Command. You could have U.S. troops on your doorstep, so to speak. Do you see that as a threat?
Before talking about the threat, do we need that kind of presence? Does the United States need to have this kind of military presence in Africa? What would be the justification for that kind of presence along the continent?
Okay, let's turn to Eritrea's border dispute with Ethiopia. There have been several agreements. Much of those agreements have not been implemented. Why is that the case, and what are you planning to do about it?
In the first place, there is no border dispute. The border dispute was resolved in the year 2000 with an agreement signed in Algiers. A court or a commission was established to give its verdict. Based on the agreement, that verdict would be final and binding, and that was done in the year 2002. It's 5 years now. This decision has not been implemented, and its binding and final nature has been violated by the government in Ethiopia, and 5 years have passed. We would like to see this legal settlement close the chapter of conflict altogether.
There is a meeting planned for September 6th, that's next Thursday, in The Hague to discuss this particular dispute. Ethiopia says it will be there. Will Eritrea be there? And if you are going there, what do you hope to get out of the meeting?
We definitely will be there. We're not going to be there to discuss on a dispute that does not exist. The discussion will focus on demarcating the border according to the decision made by the Commission. We hope to see we go through this phase and finally see the implementation of the decision through demarcation on the ground.
You know, Washington is a guarantor of that agreement that awarded the town of Badme to Eritrea. Do you think that the problem is the fact that the agreement has not been implemented? Do you see the problem as being Washington?
Not at all. The guarantor is the international community, the United Nations, the OAU then and now the African Union, the Arab League, the European Union, the international community was present there to guarantee that agreement, and definitely and unfortunately the United States has been an obstacle in the implementation of the decision by coming up with issues that undermine the binding and final nature of that agreement. We have been appealing to the United States to remove those obstacles. Unfortunately, 5 years have passed, but this time we would like to see this process take us to another level of implementing the decision that was made by the legal commission.
Do you believe that there could be a marked improvement in relations with Ethiopia once that border issue has been resolved, once the agreement has been implemented?
I would assume that spontaneously, once the border is demarcated, there wouldn't be any reason or justification for the tension remaining between the two countries.
About a week ago, Ethiopia made some allegations. There were almost daily allegations against Eritrea, talking about Eritrea being behind a whole series of bombings. How do you respond to those allegations?
And then again, I think I would say prove it by bringing up facts and making the public opinion aware about what those accusations mean. These false accusations are, again, meant for domestic consumption. Because of the political problems of this government in Ethiopia, it points a finger on any issue on Eritrea, and we reject those false accusations, but we would also demand that those accusations are proven by evidences provided to the international public opinion, so that we can say this government has valid accusations about Eritrea's involvement in whatever bombing is happening there.
They have had the effect of heightening tensions somewhat. The former Norwegian Prime Minister was warned that there could be a danger of a new all-out war between Eritrea and Ethiopia. Are you concerned that that could happen again?
What would be the reason for any heightened tension? There is no political justification for that. If the border issue is one, as I have indicated earlier, this border issue or the dispute has been resolved. Implementation through demarcation will totally eliminate the existing tension, and we don't see any reason or justification for rising tension in the future.
Okay, Mr. President, we want to take an email from one of our viewers. This one's from Deborah from Kansas here in the United States. And her email says, "Good grief, I can't keep up with President Bush's decrees against nations he thinks are terrorists and or nations he thinks are maybe supporting nations that are terrorists. And now he's against nations that allegedly support the Islamic courts in Somalia. Can the United Nations be of any help against the United States and its accusations?"
Well, if the matter has been left to the United Nations, and people may recall the decision of the Security Council, which forbade the intervention of any neighboring country, even in a peacekeeping form. Unfortunately, the government in Ethiopia violated all resolutions of the United Nations and invaded Somalia. And the question in Somalia is not a matter of the Islamic courts, it's a question of the Somali people who have gone through difficult times for the last 15 years, who would like to reconstitute Somalia and find a way where they can contribute to the stability of this region. Unfortunately, the United States is not allowing the United Nations to play its appropriate role in getting involved to resolve these problems. What we see happening in Somalia is an unwarranted intervention of the United States through the government in Ethiopia. And we would call on the United Nations to get involved actively and take the file from those who are messing the situation in Somalia and find a solution where Somalis can find an environment conducive for resolving their problems.
Let's turn to the situation of aid in Eritrea. There are no aid organizations, foreign aid organizations, working in Eritrea right now. In a country which has a per capita income of something like $220, should you not be welcoming those aid organizations into your country?
I wouldn't want to contest the fact that you mentioned about our need for aid, but when we need aid, we will ask for it. We cannot expect any party to impose aid on us when we have not asked for it. So how can one possibly make this an issue of controversy with the Eritrean government or with the people of this country? When we need aid, we will ask for it. When we are not in need of aid, when we are convinced that we can live on our toil and feed ourselves, and we would like to learn how to feed ourselves and how to work to relieve ourselves from aid, why would someone come and say, you need aid and we will give you aid?
You recently held meetings with Chinese officials. These were officials from the Communist Party in China. What was discussed at those meetings?
Business as usual. We have relations with a number of countries. We have cooperation programs with China, with the European Union, with our neighbors in the Arab world. And this is business as usual, no more, no less.
Is the focus changing somewhat? Is China having a greater influence in that part of the world, do you believe?
I don't think so. That is something people would like to create as a perception by smoke screening and concealing facts on the ground, trying to give the impression that China is coming and replacing other actors in Africa and our region, which is not true. And we definitely believe Africa can benefit by having a multifaceted relationship with the international community. China is one party that could play a role in resolving the problems of poverty and development along the continent. And others are also invited. They have been there, and China could be one of those parties that could contribute to cooperation programs with African countries and change the lot for better.
At this stage, do you think that there is too much of a focus, too much of a dependence on what Western nations call the anchor states of Africa, countries like Nigeria, South Africa, Kenya and Ethiopia?
I think that is a misguided policy. Africa and sub-regions could organize itself, develop mechanisms for cooperation, and find the best or the better way for improving the livelihood of communities here and there. Why would one major power like to police or even promote its strategic interests through what people call anchor countries? Do we need anchor countries? Why wouldn't it be possible for sub-regions having their own regional organizations and developing ties with whoever is interested in promoting strategic interests with those entities? This flawed policy has caused a lot of problems in so many parts of this continent, and we say we do not need this kind of intervention through anchor countries that would marginalize a number of countries and communities and create friction amongst neighboring countries, which we don't need in Africa at the moment.
Mr. President, that's where we have to leave it. Thank you very much for joining us.
You're most welcome.
And thank you for being with us. Riz is back next week, and on the show he'll be talking to one of South Africa's most popular bands, Freshly Ground. That's on Monday. Don't forget, if you have any thoughts about pressing issues around the world, send us your emails to riz@aljazeera.net. Street Talk is next.